My wife secretly became a surrogate for her wealthy boss against my will. Until I warned it'd destroy us, I never expected her entire life to collapse. I, Ethan, 43, male, kept my mouth shut at first, watched the train wreck unfold, and then made my moves when the timing was perfect. Let's just say by the end she was left with nothing but her own mess. You think you know what a normal Monday night looks like? For me, it was sitting at the kitchen table grading some of my son's math homework while my daughters argued over who got the last pudding cup. Wendy was scrolling on her phone, acting like she was running a Fortune 500 company instead of just middle management at some luxury retail office. Then she hit me with it. I've decided I'm going to be a surrogate. I looked up thinking she was joking. She wasn't smiling, she wasn't even nervous. She said it like she was announcing what was for dinner. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so ridiculous. I thought maybe she was trolling me. A surrogate for who? Your Sims character? She rolled her eyes, annoyed I didn't immediately clap for her bravery. No, for Peter and Stella. I froze. Peter Whitmore, her boss, rich guy, 40s, drives an imported sports car that costs more than our house. His wife Stella, who I'd only seen in passing, looked like the kind of woman who pretends Whole Foods is roughing it. You've lost your damn mind, I said flatly. Wendy straightened up like she was giving a TED talk. It's an opportunity, Ethan. They've been trying for years, and I can help. Plus, she paused for dramatic effect. They offered money, a lot of money, and Peter hinted that once I do this, a promotion might be in the works. I sat back in my chair, staring at her. My daughters had gone quiet, sensing the storm brewing. My son was still scratching out answers on his worksheet, oblivious. I told them all to go to their rooms. They didn't need to hear this. So let me get this straight, I said slowly, leaning forward on my elbows. You want to have your boss's baby for money, and you think that's not going to absolutely nuke this family? Wendy crossed her arms like I was the unreasonable one. It's not my baby, Ethan. It's theirs. I'm just the carrier. And it's not just about the money. It's about helping someone. I smirked. Right. Because you're Mother Teresa now, just with a direct deposit. Her face hardened. You're being dismissive. This is noble. It's my body, my choice. There it was, the golden phrase. I set my pen down and leaned back, letting out a low chuckle. That's cute. You're going to use a slogan about tattoos and birth control to justify carrying your boss's kid like it's a side hustle. Wendy slammed her phone on the table. Why can't you just support me for once? Do you know how much this could change for us? We could pay off debt, finally upgrade this house, get the kids into better schools. I cut her off with a hand wave. Don't bring the kids into this. This isn't about them. This is about you wanting to feel important and play savior to your boss. You think he's going to put your picture up on his fireplace? Number one, you'll push out his kid, he'll say thanks, and you'll go back to being his underpaid assistant. She gasped like I'd slapped her. That's cruel. That's reality. I stood up, towering over the table. Let me make this crystal clear, Wendy. If you go through with this, we are done. End of story. No discussion, no counseling, no forgiveness arc. Done. The room was dead silent. Wendy's jaw tightened. She stared back at me like I was the villain in her story. You can't control me. This is my body, my choice. I shook my head, chuckling under my breath. You're right. I can't control you, but I can control me. And I'm telling you right now, if you want to destroy this marriage to carry Peter Whitmore's kid, then don't expect me to be here picking up the pieces. After you make that choice, you live with the fallout. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it, picking up her phone again with shaking hands. She tried to act calm, but I could see it, the little smirk she wore, like she thought I was bluffing. I wasn't bluffing that night. While she pretended to scroll Instagram, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I wasn't hurt, I wasn't sad, I was pissed. But underneath that, I was clear-headed. Wendy was so delusional, she actually thought this was some golden ticket for our family. She thought she could bulldoze over my opinion, drop a my body, my choice bomb, and I'd just roll over. She didn't know who she was dealing with. I'm not the type to grovel. I'm not the type to give second chances for this level of betrayal. She wanted to play stupid games with her boss, fine, but she was going to win some very stupid prizes. As I lay there, I made myself a promise. I wouldn't fight her on this. I wouldn't scream, beg, or throw tantrums. I'd just stand back, let her do what she wanted, and then when the cards fell, she'd realize exactly what she lost. And spoiler alert, it wasn't just me. It was everything. Wendy went full steam ahead like my words were background noise. A week later, she was already talking about paperwork. Not with me, of course, with them, Peter and Stella. She thought she was some noble hero in a Hallmark movie. But in reality, she was just signing herself up to be a womb for hire behind my back. I didn't even confront her about the papers. What was the point? I'd already drawn my line. She wanted to pretend she was saving the world while really chasing a payday and a pat on the head. Fine. But I wasn't going to waste breath arguing with someone too delusional to see what she was giving up. What I didn't expect was the circus that came after. One Saturday, I walked into my own living room and found an audience waiting for me. Wendy sat there, arms crossed like she was queen of the castle. On one side of her was Catherine, her mother, the kind of woman who believes her daughters are angels no matter what dumb decisions they make. On the other side was Joy, her sister, who'd never held a real job in her life but somehow thought she had authority to lecture me. And to top it off, Wendy's friend from church, Patty, sitting there clutching her Bible like she'd been hired to add moral weight to the ambush. Wendy gave me that smug look. "We need to talk." I dropped my keys on the counter and looked at the lineup on my couch. "What's this? A jury? Let me guess. I'm the defendant." Catherine leaned forward, all fake sympathy. "Ethan, honey, we're just trying to help you see reason. Wendy is doing something beautiful, something selfless. You should be proud of her." I laughed. Actually laughed. Selfless? She's doing it for a paycheck and a job title. If it was so selfless, why is she bragging about the money and the promotion? Joy jumped in, her voice sharp. "You're just jealous. You don't like that Wendy is finally doing something bigger than you." I tilted my head, smirking. Bigger than me? She's literally doing something bigger inside her stomach for her boss. If that's what you call noble, your bar is in the basement. Patty cleared her throat like she was about to deliver gospel. "Ethan, sometimes God calls on us to sacrifice for others. You should support your wife. She's answering a higher calling." I raised an eyebrow. God told her to sign up to carry Peter Whitmore's kid? Interesting. I must have missed that verse. Wendy slammed her hands on her knees. "Why can't you just stop being negative for once? Everyone here can see what an opportunity this is except you." I looked around the room, then back at her. "Oh, I see it. I see it crystal clear. It's an opportunity for Peter and Stella. They get their baby, you get used, and I get out." Catherine's face pinched like I was supposed to be ashamed. "How can you speak that way about your wife? Don't you care about her feelings?" That's when it clicked. This wasn't about me being stubborn, it was about Wendy wanting cheerleaders. And when I didn't clap, she brought in backup. But here's the thing about backup. They can yell all they want, but they don't change the scoreboard. I grabbed my jacket off the chair and started heading for the door. "You know what? I'm not playing this game. If you all want to sit here and pretend Wendy's choices don't have consequences, fine, but don't drag me into this intervention crap. I clocked out already." Wendy jumped up, furious. "Clocked out? What's that supposed to mean?" I turned, hand on the doorknob. "It means you stopped being my wife the second you decided Peter and Stella's family mattered more than ours. You made your choice. I'm making mine." I walked out, leaving the jury in silence. The cool evening air felt better than that suffocating living room. Later that night, I came back with stuff for my kids. After the kids got ready for bed, my youngest daughter, she's only 9 but smarter than her mother gives her credit for, pulled me aside. "Dad, is Mom going to have another baby?" I swallowed, crouching down to her level. "Looks like it." "Will it be our brother or sister?" she asked, eyes wide. That one stung. I had to take a breath before answering. "No, sweetheart, it won't. It'll be someone else's." She frowned, confused, but nodded slowly and padded off to her room. That right there sealed it for me. It wasn't just about Wendy ignoring me, it was about the confusion, the damage she was planting in our kids' heads. She thought this was all some heroic storyline, but to me it was twisted. She was willing to risk tearing the family apart just to feel important. And in that moment I knew whatever happened next, I wasn't protecting her anymore. I was protecting the kids. Wendy could live in her fantasy world all she wanted, but I was done playing along. The next few weeks were like living with someone who thought she'd been cast in a movie only she could see. Our guest room, which used to hold random stuff like the treadmill nobody used and boxes of holiday decorations, got turned into her little shrine. Not a nursery, no crib, no baby toys, nothing like that. Instead, it was stacked high with binders labeled pregnancy plan, glossy pamphlets about prenatal care, and neatly folded tote bags stuffed with vitamins, creams, and supplements Peter and Stella had dropped off like goodie baskets. Every time I passed that room, it looked less like part of our house and more like an office for someone running a PR campaign. Papers on the desk, sticky notes everywhere, even a little calendar she kept updating with her appointments like they were national holidays. Wendy acted like she'd just been crowned queen of selflessness. She bragged about every single doctor's visit, narrating her blood pressure readings like a sports announcer. She showed off ultrasound pictures to Catherine and Joy, holding them up like she was displaying artwork. I overheard her once on the phone with her mom saying, "I feel like I finally found my purpose. Peter and Stella are so grateful. They keep telling me I'm saving their family. Saving their family, not ours." She wasn't even subtle about it. At dinner one night she said, "The doctor said everything looks perfect." Stella cried when I showed her the ultrasound. She waited for applause like the kids and I were supposed to clap. I looked up from my plate and said, "Cool. Not my baby, not my problem," then went right back to eating. The kids laughed a little, not because they understood the joke, but because they knew I didn't care anymore. Wendy's face turned red. She thought she was starring in some inspirational documentary and I was just a bitter extra. The reality was she was making herself look like a fool. Meanwhile, I wasn't just sitting back. I was moving. I met with James, my lawyer, the week after her intervention stunt. I didn't come in angry or ranting. I laid it all out like a business plan. Wendy was prioritizing another man's family over ours. She was reckless, and I needed out before she dragged me down with her. James didn't even blink. He'd seen it all before. By the time I left his office, the paperwork was ready to go. I didn't wait. I filed. It wasn't some thinking about it stage, no weighing pros and cons, no late-night heart-to-hearts with buddies. Wendy had made her choice and I wasn't giving her a second chance to spin it. A week later, those papers were served to her at her job, right in front of Peter and Stella. I asked James to arrange it that way. I wanted them all to see exactly where my line was. Wendy came home that night looking like she'd swallowed a grenade. She stormed into the kitchen, slammed the papers on the counter, and started yelling, "How could you humiliate me like that, at work, in front of Peter and Stella?" I leaned against the fridge, arms crossed, cool as ever. "Humiliate you? You did that yourself. I just put it on paper." She threw her hands up, pacing like a lunatic. "You're overreacting. This doesn't have to end our marriage. I'm doing something amazing and you're too selfish to see it." I smirked. "Amazing for who, Peter and Stella? You're treating them like royalty while turning your own family into peasants." Her eyes went glassy like she was about to cry. "You don't understand. They said once this is over, everything will change. They promised." I cut her off. "Promises from rich people. Good luck with that. They'll take the baby and pat you on the back. You think they'll keep you around?" That one hit. I could tell by the way she flinched. But instead of admitting I was right, she doubled down. "You're cruel. You're jealous. You're trying to sabotage me because you can't stand that I'm finally doing something bigger than myself." I laughed under my breath. "No, I just can't stand stupidity. And right now you're swimming in it." She stormed off, muttering something about Catherine and Joy supporting her no matter what. Good. Let them. She could whine to them all she wanted. I was past caring. From then on, every time she brought up the pregnancy, I had one response. Not my baby, not my problem. She hated it, but it was the truth. The funny part, Wendy thought the divorce papers were a bluff, like I'd suddenly break down one night, apologize, and beg her to reconsider. She strutted around with her binders and pamphlets like she was untouchable, convinced Peter and Stella would shower her with praise and money, and that eventually I'd come crawling back. She had no idea. There was no crawling, no begging, no second chance. I wasn't bluffing, I was already out, and the only thing left was for her little savior act to blow up in her face. Didn't take long. It started the night before she went into labor. Wendy paced the living room like she was practicing for a stage play. She had a little overnight bag by the door stuffed with the expensive maternity kits Peter and Stella had bought her. She kept checking it every 5 minutes like she was waiting for applause. Our younger two kids sat on the couch watching cartoons, but Wendy kept interrupting, sighing loudly, clutching her stomach like she wanted an audience for every false contraction. At one point, she made the whole family sit down so she could give a speech, no joke. She actually stood there in front of the TV holding her binder of pregnancy plans and told the kids, "Mommy is about to do something very special. We're helping Peter and Stella have a family, and one day you'll understand how important that is." The kids just blinked at her. My youngest whispered, "But why can't you just stay with us?" Wendy brushed it off like it was background noise. That's when I knew she wasn't even pretending to care about the fallout anymore. She was obsessed with playing the hero. The next morning my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Call after call, text after text, all caps messages like it was happening. "Answer me now. Where are you?" Wendy had gone into labor. I didn't answer a single one. Didn't even open most of the texts. My lawyer had already told me document, don't engage, so I screenshotted everything, then tossed my phone back on the desk and went right back to work. But Wendy wasn't about to suffer quietly. If I wouldn't give her the attention she craved, she'd manufacture an audience. And who better than our 14-year-old daughter? Wendy marched into the school office that morning, signed her out without a word to me, and dragged her straight to the hospital. No warning, no discussion. Just pulled her out of algebra and said, "You're coming with me. You need to witness this." Later I got the play-by-play from Susan, my nurse friend who works there. According to her, Wendy strutted into the hospital lobby like she owned it. Our daughter trailed behind, clutching her jacket like she wanted to disappear. Wendy was glowing, bragging to the receptionist, "I'm carrying the Whitmore baby." You'd think she was announcing royalty instead of checking in for labor. Peter and Stella arrived an hour later, and just like that, Wendy was invisible. The staff whisked them into a private suite. Nurses hovered, doctors shook hands. Wendy, she was wheeled into a regular room, treated like what she was, the carrier. Stella held her hand. Peter kept checking his watch, and Wendy, desperate for validation, kept saying things like, "This is our miracle, we're all a team," while everyone else focused on the actual parents. Meanwhile, our daughter was stuck in the waiting room for hours scrolling her phone and watching daytime TV. At one point, Wendy begged the staff to let her in the delivery room. "She needs to see this. She needs to be part of it." The nurse shot it down instantly. Hospital policy. Stella got the seat at the bedside, not a 14-year-old. That alone told the story. Wendy wanted her daughter there not for bonding but for clout. She needed a witness to her big moment. When the baby finally arrived, the whole charade collapsed. Peter and Stella didn't throw a party, no heartfelt speech, no grand gesture. They scooped up their newborn, thanked Wendy like they were tipping a valet, and disappeared into their very important person suite. Wendy was left lying in a bed, sweaty, empty-handed, and begging the nurse to fetch our daughter. Joy said when our kid came in, she just stood there awkward, staring at the empty crib. Finally, she asked quietly, "So where's the baby?" Wendy stammered about how it wasn't ours to keep and we did a beautiful thing, but our daughter wasn't fooled. Later that evening, I went to the hospital and picked her up myself. On the drive home, she told me, "Dad, it was weird. Mom made me skip school for nothing. Everyone only cared about the baby and those rich people." She barely looked at me. That hit harder than anything. Wendy had dragged her into her circus and left her feeling invisible. Catherine called me later, furious. "How could you not be there for Wendy? She needed you." I put the phone on speaker, sipping coffee. "Not my baby, not my problem." "She's your wife," Catherine snapped. "Soon-to-be ex-wife," I corrected. "Check the paperwork." She ranted about how Wendy had given so much and deserved better. I let her vent, then shut it down. Choices have consequences. Wendy made hers, then I hung up. For the first time in months, I felt light. Wendy thought she was starring in some noble documentary, but in reality, she was just a disposable extra in Peter and Stella's happy ending. The next morning, I walked into James's office and signed the settlement packet to finalize the divorce filing. No hesitation, no nerves, just relief. Wendy's obsession had officially consumed her, and for me, it had officially set me free. After the birth, she didn't come back to my house. She hauled her bags to Joy's place, crashing in her sister's spare room like a teenager who'd gotten kicked out by her parents. She piled her clothes and the leftover maternity kits Peter and Stella had given her into the corner, like trophies from a war she didn't win. Joy tried to spin it as helping her get back on her feet, but really it was babysitting a grown woman who had nowhere else to go. Wendy strutted around Joy's house like she still had something to brag about after the baby was born, but reality hit Wendy like a truck. Peter and Stella had taken their newborn and vanished into their perfect manicured world. No visits, no long emotional thank you letters, no thick envelope full of money, just silence. She hadn't signed a single binding contract about compensation. The money part was never in writing. Everything she bragged about was just promises whispered during lunch breaks and late-night phone calls. "We'll make sure you're taken care of. There'll be a bonus. Trust us." Wendy, in all her entitled stupidity, thought her boss and his wife would honor handshake deals. And Peter, he took the baby, took his wife, and vanished. He didn't return her calls. Stella didn't text back. Wendy was nothing more than the womb they rented. That's when the begging started. The first call came a week later, right when I was making dinner for the kids. Wendy's voice was frantic, all shaky, like the world was ending. "Ethan, I need money for groceries this week. Joy's getting tired of covering everything. Can you just help me out until things settle? I put her on speaker, stirred the pasta, and said flatly, "Not my baby, not my problem," then hung up. The next day I got a voicemail. The tone had shifted, less panicked, more bitter. "I can't believe you're leaving me to drown like this. You were supposed to be my partner, be a man for once in your life. I saved it, not because I cared, but because James had drilled it into me. Save everything. The more she talks, the more she proves your case." When she realized I wasn't budging, she rerouted her campaign to Catherine. Catherine called me one night, her voice full of fake outrage. "Ethan, you can't just abandon Wendy. She sacrificed her body for that family. She deserves support." I laughed into the phone. "Support?" She torched her marriage and handed her womb over to her boss for free. "That's not sacrifice, that's stupidity." Catherine gasped like I'd spit on her. "Don't you dare talk about my daughter that way. She's struggling." "Yeah," I said calmly. "Choices have consequences. She made hers." Then I hung up. Not long after, Joy tried her luck. She cornered me in her driveway when I came to pick up the kids. She had her arms folded, her face smug. "You can't just let her drown, Ethan. She's family." I smirked. "No, Joy, she's your family." Wendy chose her boss's family over mine. Big difference. For once, Joy didn't have a comeback. Even she knew Wendy had played herself. Meanwhile, Wendy turned Joy's spare room into her pity palace. My daughter told me later that her mom would sit up at night scrolling through old texts from Stella, like a dumped girlfriend, whispering stuff like, "They'll come around. They'll realize what I did for them." But Peter and Stella never came around. They had their baby, their happy little family. Wendy was just a footnote. Her humiliation started leaking into everything. She stopped showing up for the kids on time. Sometimes she'd cancel the weekends she'd informally scheduled with them during our separation, claiming she was too tired. Other times, she'd take them but spend the whole visit crying or ranting about how unfair everything was. My oldest, who was already old enough to see through it, rolled her eyes when she came back one Sunday. Mom keeps saying she's important, but all she does is cry. The younger two didn't even argue when I told them plans had changed. They were starting to realize, too, that their mom had traded their family for a fantasy and now she had nothing. The pity calls kept coming, but the tone shifted. At first she yelled, calling me heartless. Later she sounded pathetic, rambling about bills, about how Peter avoided her in the office, about how Stella looked through her like she was invisible. She kept trying to fish for sympathy. I gave her none. Every time she called, I answered with the same line, "Choices have consequences. You made yours," and then I'd hang up. Wendy thought she'd end up the hero. She thought she'd be praised, rewarded, remembered. Instead, she ended up freeloading at her sister's house, broke, ignored, and humiliated. She thought she could juggle two families. In the end, she had none. But Wendy wasn't done swinging. Delusional people rarely are. When begging, guilt trips, and pity parades didn't work, she played her last card, dragging me to court. The paperwork came in a thick envelope full of half-baked lies. Custody, spousal support, child support, the whole thing. Wendy's lawyer painted her like some saintly martyr abandoned by a cruel, bitter husband. According to them, she had sacrificed her body for a noble cause and been left to fend for herself while I heartlessly walked away. Reading it almost made me laugh. I dropped the stack on James's desk. He flipped through, smirked, and said, "We'll shred this in 5 minutes." The day of the hearing felt less like family court and more like opening night of a bad play. Wendy walked in dressed like she was auditioning for tragic single mom of the year. Flowing dress, binder clutched to her chest, eyes red from forced tears. Catherine was in the front row, glaring at me like I'd murdered her cat. Joy sat next to her, arms folded like backup muscle. Me? I walked in with James, cool as ever. My kids weren't dragged into this circus. I'd never use them as props. Wendy's lawyer went first. He spun his sugary fairy tale. Wendy had given her body selflessly. Wendy had been abandoned in her most vulnerable time. Wendy was the primary caregiver, and losing custody would irreparably damage the children. He even used the line, "She put another family's needs before her own." I didn't flinch. Then came Wendy's performance. She dabbed her eyes with a tissue and looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor, I did something incredible. I gave life to another family, and instead of standing by me, Ethan humiliated me. He walked away. He taught our children that sacrifice means nothing. I carried that child with love, and I was abandoned in my darkest hour." Her voice cracked perfectly on cue. Catherine sniffled dramatically in the audience. Joy nodded like it was gospel. For a second, I almost admired her commitment to the role. But the thing about performances is that they collapse under evidence. James stood calm and methodical and started dealing out receipts like a blackjack dealer. First the texts, screenshots of Wendy bragging, "My body, my choice." Ethan's being dramatic. "He'll get over it," and another, "Once I do this, I'll have the promotion and he can't stop me." Then the paperwork, proof she'd signed preliminary medical consent forms with Peter and Stella behind my back, paperwork about the pregnancy process, but nothing that mentioned money or obligations. She'd gone rogue. Then the voicemails. James played them on a speaker, Wendy's voice blaring through the courtroom. "You owe me, Ethan. You're supposed to help me. Be a man." The judge leaned back in his chair, unimpressed. And then came the hammer, school records. James produced attendance logs showing how Wendy pulled our daughter out of school to drag her to the hospital during labor. He also submitted notes from the custody evaluator about the kids reporting their mom cries a lot, and talks more about Peter and Stella than about us. James's voice was steady. "Your Honor, this isn't sacrifice, this is recklessness. She prioritized the wants of her boss over her children's education and stability. That's not noble, that's negligence." The custody evaluator's report flagged a pattern of escalating instability, missed pickups, emotional outbursts, dragging the kids into adult drama. The courtroom went dead silent. Wendy's lawyer shuffled his papers like he was hoping they'd turn into new arguments. Catherine's smug face cracked. Joy muttered something, but even she knew it was over. The judge turned to Wendy, his voice stern. "Mrs. Everett, you did not enter into a legal agreement. You prioritized your employer's needs over your children's well-being. You pulled a minor from school for your own emotional comfort during labor. You disregarded your husband's concerns and ignored the consequences. This court does not reward reckless behavior." Wendy's tears turned real. She tried to interject, sputtering about sacrifice and nobody understanding, but the judge shut her down. "Enough. This is not a platform for self-promotion. This is a custody hearing." The ruling was brutal. I retained full custody of the kids. Wendy was granted limited supervised visitation until she could prove she was capable of putting her children first. As for spousal or financial support, denied. The judge's words cut sharper than anything James or I could have said. "It is unreasonable to expect Mr. Everett to shoulder the consequences of your independent decisions." Wendy's jaw dropped. Catherine gasped. Joy muttered, "This is rigged," but even she looked defeated. Wendy stormed out before the judge even finished muttering about how unfair it was. Catherine followed, clutching her purse like someone had stolen from her. Joy trailed behind, shooting me one last dirty look that had no bite left in it. James closed his briefcase, straightened his tie, and said, "Well, that was easy." Walking out of that courtroom, I felt like a weight had been lifted, not because I enjoyed seeing Wendy humiliated, though I'll admit it was satisfying, but because the truth finally cut through her fantasy. She thought she could spin herself as the hero and me as the villain. Instead, her own words and actions did all the work for us. She wanted the spotlight. All she got was the judge's scorn. She thought she was writing a redemption arc. What she really wrote was her own downfall. After court, Wendy tried to save face. She walked around like the ruling didn't mean anything, like it was just a temporary setback. Catherine clung to that fantasy too, telling anyone who'd listen that the judge didn't see the full picture and that Wendy would fight back stronger. Joy nodded along, but even she looked tired of carrying her sister's baggage. Meanwhile, my life shifted back into focus. The kids were with me full-time now, and it felt like the house finally had peace. No lectures about supporting Wendy's dream, no pamphlets scattered around, no delusional speeches about saving another family, just the sound of my kids arguing over who got the bigger slice of pizza or laughing at dumb YouTube videos. Normal. And I loved it. But Wendy wasn't finished making a fool of herself. About a month after the custody ruling, she showed up at my door unannounced. The kids were in the living room playing a video game. I opened the door and there she was, hair messy, clothes wrinkled, standing on the porch like she hadn't slept in days. "Ethan," she started, voice trembling, "I think we should talk about me moving back in, for the kids." I stared at her for a solid 5 seconds, then laughed. "Move back in? You mean into the house you ditched so you could carry your boss's kid?" "Hard pass." Her eyes welled up. "I just need a second chance. I can't stay at Joy's forever. She's getting tired of me. The kids miss me. You can't just shut me out." I lowered my voice so the kids couldn't hear. "Wendy, you're not being shut out. You're being shut down. You burned this bridge. It's gone. The kids have stability now, and you're not going to screw that up again." She tried one last jab. "You'll regret this. They'll grow up and hate you for keeping them from me." I stepped closer, my voice steady. "No, they'll grow up knowing I protected them from your selfishness. That's the difference." She left in tears, and the kids didn't even notice she'd been there. When begging to move back in failed, she tried a different angle: money. She filed another motion, this time claiming she needed financial support because I had abandoned her after years of marriage. The judge tossed it out in less than 10 minutes. James didn't even need to speak much. The court already had a thick file of evidence showing Wendy had single-handedly detonated the marriage. Every move she made only dug her hole deeper. Catherine eventually backed off too. At first, she called weakly, trying to guilt me. "Ethan, you can't let the mother of your children struggle like this. What kind of example are you setting?" But as Wendy spiraled and her story fell apart, Catherine started running out of excuses. The calls became less frequent and eventually stopped altogether. Even she realized her daughter wasn't the saint she'd tried to paint. Joy hung on a little longer, but by the time Wendy's stuff had taken over her spare room and half her garage, even she cracked. My oldest told me once. Aunt Joy yelled at Mom for not cleaning up after herself. Mom cried and said everyone's turning against her. I had to bite my tongue not to say, maybe because you burned every bridge you had. The kids, though, they were my priority. I kept their routine solid: school, sports, dinners at the table. They adjusted better than I expected. Sometimes my daughter asked if Mom would get better, and I just told her, "That's up to her, but you're safe here." That was enough. Wendy still had supervised visits, but even those felt awkward. She'd show up late, sometimes not at all. When she did come, she'd spend half the time venting about how unfair everything was instead of focusing on the kids. They started dreading those visits, which told me all I needed to know. By then, Wendy wasn't a threat. She was just noise, and I'd learned how to tune her out. The final nail came a few months later. Wendy sent me one last email, a long rambling essay about how she'd done everything out of love, how she just wanted to feel important, and how she never expected it to end this way. She ended it with, "Please, can we just start over?" I didn't reply. I forwarded it to James for the file, then deleted it. Because here's the truth. Wendy wanted me to be her backup plan. She thought no matter how bad she screwed up, I'd still be there to catch her. She thought she could gamble everything: our marriage, our kids, her dignity, and that somehow I'd clean up the mess. But I wasn't her safety net. I was the guy who finally let her fall. Now my life is simple. I wake up, make breakfast with the kids, go to work, come home to a house that feels steady again. No drama, no delusions, no circus, just peace. Wendy, she's a cautionary tale. She traded her family for a fantasy, and when the fantasy collapsed, she had nothing left. She thought she'd be remembered as a savior, but the only thing people remember is how she destroyed her own life. Not my baby.